Phasmophobia is a horror co-op game where you hunt ghosts and sabotage your friends by closing the fucking door on them when the ghost hunts. Overall, it's a terrible game, 10 out of 10. Alright, well, anyways, welcome to a quick review of the problems with Phasmophobia. Quite honestly, this game is great, but at some point you will begin to notice the problems with the game and become bored of it. But before we get into this game, I would just like to say that I do not think that this should be a turnoff for buying this game. I totally recommend getting it with some friends. I'm just citing pretty much what everyone says about the game for its problems. So let's dive into the reasons for the problems, I guess. Now, Phasmophobia is fun, but it only seems to be fun when you're newer to the game. After about 5,000 goddamn hours where you haven't seen the sunlight in years and the police have declared you dead in absentia while your family needs consoling, the game gets stale and boring, although shaking it up with friends and messing around can change this. See, ultimately, the problem with Phasmophobia becoming boring isn't how the game is designed, but rather what it's lacking in design. The game was originally made by one guy, and still kind of is. The main developer has now hired another programmer and artist to help him. So literally only 3 people work on a game that has sold 3 to 4 million copies in total. And within its prime to the current day, although a lot has changed, in terms of features and quality of life improvements and even new maps and ghosts, the experience still feels the same from its prime 8 months ago. I find it really surprising how some people manage to play the game for about 1,000 to 2,000 hours or so and get to level 4,000 to 6,000, and yet still play the game. Ultimately, until we get more updates, Phasmophobia's gameplay is sort of a loop, or repetition of uncertainty. The game can be random and unpredictable, but ghost behavior only changes when the developers change it, which means that if you play the game enough, you can literally study the behavior of the ghost and become a complete expert, acquire yourself a PhD, and then realize you wasted more hours of your life in this loop of a game. Again, the game is fun and great, but at some point, well, you kinda have to take a break because otherwise it gets boring and stale. Although, when the game becomes chaotic and unpredictable, and truly scary, that is when it shines. This game is meant for a more higher-end PC, but you can still play on a shitty laptop as long as you properly make the graphics worse. However, remember, this game was made by only one guy, and now technically has 2 programmers. Bugs and performance issues can be slow to fix, or be slow to fix because of priority. Obviously, I understand that they have a lot of work to accomplish. I would imagine they only fix the worst possible bugs to keep the game playable. However, you will occasionally experience bugs, although not too much. One of the only times the game was essentially unplayable because of a bug was around May of this year. For a brief period, ghosts could actually completely open closet doors or lockers and kill you had you been sighted by a ghost. Normally in Phasmophobia, if you were to get hunted by a ghost and be near the ghost room, if you can manage to run to a closet or locker or safe hiding spot, normally the ghost will not catch you or get you, although it will recognize that you hid, and maybe even open the door of where you're hiding just a little. But with this bug, it essentially threw off the balance of the entire game, because it made going inside to get evidence while having low sanity impossible, making objectives basically 100 times harder and the game 10 times harder in general. But where I think the performance and bugs of the game truly shine is playing on VR. Now, this may be just because I'm using a headset that isn't really supported with this game, but I still find people finding issues with VR from this game. But I will just list the ones I encountered and remembered. Number 1. When loading up the game, the title card of the game becomes broken, and looking in any direction will make the title card look like a solitaire finish, or look extremely similar to when you break a skybox in a Source game. Number 2. Teleport grab. Although not necessarily a bug, it is a little broken, requiring you to be super specific with where you aim at an object, rendering the VR mechanic useless. Number 3. FPS obviously can drop, but this problem is more so a result of lower tier specs, although the devs have made an effort to fix some of these problems. And many others. Now, as I mentioned, Phasmophobia can get boring as you get higher in level and repetitive. What this means is that, if you're a player at a high level who can manage to continue playing the game after many hours and levels, well, the problem is that there will rarely be anyone like you. I'd argue a majority of Phasmophobia's player base are new players or mid-tier level players. At some point, there isn't much to do or gain from the game, so the players with the higher levels need to take a break, and the cycle repeats. Although playing this game with friends who know what they're doing while messing around is certainly an interesting experience, and VR offers a more terrifying and uncertain experience, and again, even though occasionally this game can be quite buggy and weird, like the time when today, as of writing this part in the script, I had played with a friend, and this Yuri ghost wouldn't fucking give us freezing temperatures to show that it was a Yuri, which ended up in both of our deaths. This game can be great, although not everyone can play it for a while. It really depends on who you are as a gamer, whether you be the type to play Phasmophobia completely until you really feel that there's no reason to play, or the type that plays with friends for a couple hours and maybe even reaches level 50 or 100 but then completely stops playing. The addition of new maps, items, and reworks are too slow to bring any quick hype because all most people can do is wait, and by the time some people leave the game, an update is either announced or is still being worked on. The most recent major update was on June 18th, adding a new map, 2 new ghost types, and plenty of bug fixes, but the last major update that I consider major was March 6th. It's not to say updates are almost like yearly at a time, but rather, major updates are at least a couple months in between each other. And while many of these problems can simply be solved with a large development studio, it makes the updates feel more special and exciting, I guess you could say. Let me know an example of an indie horror game made by a small team that is slowly improving over time. SCP Secret Laboratory. Probably one of my favorites in multiplayer games. I rarely encounter toxic people in it. This game is just pure chaos, or pure action-packed movie-like at certain times. SCP Secret Lab has been in development since 2018. I started playing in 2019. Now, 2019 was 2 years ago. Crazy, right? So surely the game has changed a lot since then. And I guess you could say that, but to me, the game has always felt the same way. It's just certain patches, buffs, nerfs, and even changes to SCPs that have changed. Overall, the mood, maps, and overall just the chaos of the game really hasn't changed much. Now, as of this video, 2 new major updates are scheduled, one being a rework to guns, adding new ones as well, and a bunch of new features that make the game so much fucking better. The other being a rework to the most famous SCP, SCP-173. Now, Northwood is the studio that developed Secret Lab, and at first, of course, updates were slow, and they still are. I don't mean that insultingly, it's just how it is, and even they admit it. There are a lot of expectations when it comes to small game studios to keep on perfecting a game that they made that had a great concept, with its development being greatly executed while missing key features. Everyone expects that once you hire more people as a result of the game's successful development, you should release updates faster. This can make people grow impatient or even bored of the game, because while they have played the same game 1,000 times, a new version hasn't been released yet, and may not release for months. Although, to give credit to both studios, again, Phasmophobia is being developed by like 2 people, with another person being a graphics designer, and Northwood has way more developers and designers. It can be a bit daunting having to wait for updates and changes to make games like Phasmophobia less boring, but sorry little boy, that's how it is. I mean, just be happy the game you like playing so much even exists. A lot of AAA studios tend to hype up a seemingly cool release, only for it to be shit, and totally not what anyone expected in a bad way. But indie developers have totally picked up the pace, and released games that only the AAA studios wish they could've. Although, again, it would feel less special and hype if major updates were to be released every few weeks there to be a larger development team for Phasmophobia. So, what does this all mean? Well, it means that humans don't like time, because of course, time is the eventual end of our existence. Whoops, sorry. I meant that we need to give indie devs a chance and accept that, unless they were to be funded by something larger to get more development resources, people need to accept that the indie games they like playing will likely stay the same for months on end, and Phasmophobia is no different. But I can understand the grief. The concepts and execution for these games were supreme, and led to great and funny experiences. It's just boring having to wait. I mean, hey man, I got married, had 3 kids, eventually had 10 grandchildren, and acquired dementia, and died last thinking, Holy shit, a new SCP-SL update is out.